Hello, and welcome to this edition of Your Schools. This is a program where we share with our East Granby community information about the East Granby Public Schools, the initiatives that are going on in our schools, the accomplishments and achievements of our students, faculty, staff, and administrators, and generally information about our student and our school performance. Today we are shifting our focus just a little bit to speak with the chair of our East Granby Board of Education to speak more broadly about the responsibilities of the Board of Education and some of the roles and responsibilities that board members have. So today our board chair, Mr. Trevor Sanford, is joining us for this conversation. So hi Trevor.
Hello.
And welcome
Thanks for having
this
me.
edition of Your Schools.
Thank you.
So many of our viewers have probably heard your name, but don't know too much about you. So would you mind just sharing a little bit about who you are and when you joined the board and some of the things that you have found to be unique or challenging or interesting about your role as board chair?
My name's Trevor Sanford. I moved to East Granby in 2007. I began serving on the Board of Education. I was actually an appointed member filling a vacancy at the time. I then had to run during the next election cycle, at which time I was elected. That was, I believe, 2011. I'm now finishing up my third year, starting my fourth year as a member of the board. I've been the chairman since January of 2014. I guess you're looking for, in terms of things that I do on the board.
Sure.
I guess, well, the one thing I didn't expect was that the amount of work that actually goes into being the board chairman is a lot more, I think, than I ever could have possibly anticipated. There are a lot of meetings outside of the regular board meetings that I have to attend, and a lot of decisions that go on sort of behind the scenes, and so there are, practically every day there is something to be done that involves making a decision with respect to a Board of Education item.
Right, right. So we have regular Board of Education meetings twice each month, but depending on what is happening over the course of the year, we have many other meetings during the week. So for example, when we get into our negotiations with our bargaining units in our district, those meetings typically take place outside of the regular meeting, where we're negotiating with the bargaining units for our three main bargaining units that we have. So some of those meetings do take up a bit of time, as well as our budget meetings and our budget workshops as well.
That's true. I mean, if you're really into negotiating, deep into the negotiations with a bargaining unit, you could be meeting 2 or 3 times within a given week. Yes. And those can sometimes go in late into the night and into the early morning. And then, when in the middle of budget season, and that's right around the corner, as you know. And so when there are budget workshops, and we're having budget workshops and trying to put together the budget for the Board of Finance and for the town, those meetings are also can be several hours long and come outside of the regularly scheduled board meetings, and can be a couple times per week. So it can be very, very time consuming to be a member of the board, and certainly for the chairman of the board, who really should be at all of those meetings, again, very time consuming.
Yeah. So our Board of Education has about 6 committees, subcommittees of the Board of Ed, and as board chair, you serve on
2 or 3 at least. I mean, there is the negotiations committee, which we had already mentioned. There is the budget committee, which is really is a committee of the whole. All 9 members are really informal members, although some board members are more actively involved in that than others. And then
we have facilities.
There's facilities, and that's been a very busy committee in recent years because with the refurbishment at the Allgrove and more particularly the Seymour School. There's been a lot going on there. There's a communications committee,
the policy
and the policy committee, and which policy and curriculum, all of which we've been involved in recent years with a very extensive rewriting of all of our curriculum to keep up with the new state Common Core, Connecticut State Common Core standards, and then the policy committee. I mean, that really that sort of ebbs and flows, but that can also be very, very busy as well. If there's a lot of policy coming from Hartford, that we need to be aware of and to keep up with,
right?
That can also involve a significant amount of time as well.
Right. So, of all the committees that you have served on, and your overall role as board chair, what would you say has been the most rewarding or fulfilling aspect of that role for you?
I think really the budget committee for me is the most fulfilling. I mean, that's the one that you really see tangible results from. You see that every day, or in practice in the schools. When you get a budget passed and you're implementing that budget, I mean, you're actually seeing the results of your work. So for me, I guess that would be the most rewarding.
Wow, awesome. So since you talked about the budget being so rewarding for you, let's talk a little bit about the budget process, because it's important that our community understands how that process actually begins and how the budget process flows through the Board of Education prior to it getting to the Board of Finance and really becoming a public discussion, if you will. So talk a little bit about how we've worked that process through.
Sure. Well, we're in early December now, and at this point, the various building superintendents have presented budgets to you, which you and Sue Greco, the business manager for the school district, have been reviewing. At that point, there's a proposed budget that is put together, taking from the requests that come in from the various administrators. At that point, the Board of Education is brought into the process in terms of processing through those requests, and an informal budget is put together. At that point, you really have to see where the numbers are. We aren't going to come in asking for a 20% increase, but so we want to make sure that the budget is not only addressing the educational needs of the town, but also we want to be conscious of the fact of the burden that we'd be putting on the taxpayers of the town. And then that really, after that, you're really just different iterations of that budget. You have to really take a deep look at all of the proposed expenditures and decide whether or not this is going to be appropriate for this budget, and what the impact is going to be on the overall school budget. And so we really, the number usually starts off at the higher end, because you have a wish list of things that you want to do, and then you really have to start prioritizing. So as the second and the third versions of the budget come to be, that number gets whittled down, if you will. And at that point, that's really where the public sees the budget for the first time. That would be something that we would present to the Board of Finance in February, I believe. Yes, is the right month. And then and so that's really the first version that the public sees and has an opportunity to comment on, and then I think people might be a little more familiar with the process from there. The Board of Education, or the Board of Finance, will make recommendations to the Board of Ed in terms of where it thinks the budget ought to be, and then we have to go back and further refine the budget, and then we present again at a public meeting, at which point then the Board of Finance then votes on what the final budget number shall be. We then further refine the budget potentially, and then it goes to a public hearing and then a referendum. And so that's really sort of in a very condensed version how the whole budget process works. And the board, as you can see, is really extensively involved throughout most of that process.
Right. So, particularly because in any community, the budget that funds the Board of Education and the public schools is typically the largest budget in the entire town budget.
It's between 70 and 80% in most towns.
Between 70 and 80%, exactly. And so I think that raises people's awareness about, where the funds are, and they want to understand how is this money being spent.
Correct.
So we have this year and in past years sought different ways to engage board members a little bit earlier in that process, even before I pull together the final budget that I present to the board as a preliminary for the board to consider prior to adopting. In the past, we've had some workshops that board members have attended. And this year, we did something a little bit different in that we have engaged board members in our discussions with the actual building principals and program directors. So, for example, in the past week, we've had a couple of board members sit in on the discussions that myself and Sue Greco, our business manager, had with each of the building principals. So that way, board members really understand how building principals pull their budget together. They can hear for themselves some of the requests that they're asking for their building or for their program, and then they can understand where the costs and those increases in costs are coming from. So I think that's an important part of the process. And you know, each year we try to make the process a little bit more inclusive so that individuals on the Board of Education have a deeper understanding so that they are more capable of speaking to and about the budget when the time comes for them to explain to their neighbors or at a public meeting or what have you. So we continue to look for ways to do that with our budget.
I think that's been helpful both for the board and ultimately for the town in that you know, the whole process that I described a few minutes ago really has been opening up to the Board of Education members earlier and earlier. And as you mentioned, actually, and I'm glad you reminded me because I forgot to mention that. But yeah, they actually were involved in those discussions that you had with the building administrators. And so really, this upcoming year's budget, the Board of Ed will have been involved all the way from the beginning, all the way through to the end. And that's an expansion upon last year, which was actually also an expansion upon the prior years, in that we had these budget workshops and that we had really educational sessions for the Board of Ed members to understand exactly how that budget is built from the bottom up.
Right. So you've been the board chair for a while. You've been on the Board of Education for a while. You know, in your opinion, what are some of the most difficult areas that you've seen us struggle with or try to budget for?
Sure. Well, I mean, the elephant in the room really, right, is staffing. I mean, staffing really does comprise, if you look at between the salary line and the benefits line, that is approximately, I don't know, I'm a ballpark about 80% of our budget, roughly. And so, you know, you have these minimal staffing needs, and you also have contracts that have been negotiated that have built-in increases, both year over year, and then if the professionals, you know, the teachers and or the administrators have received another degree or earned more credit hours toward their degree, they also would slide over on that compensation chart. So these are built-in increases that you only have the ability to influence once every 3 years. And so that really ultimately is the ultimate driver in terms of, or the biggest driver in terms of the budget. Other items that would be equally impactful are one, and we really discussed this a lot last year if you were paying attention to the budget, are our special ed, issues. And so, you know, we as a district do try to provide as many special ed services as we can in town. Unfortunately, we can't provide the full array of those, and so for those services that we can't provide, we then have to send those students out of district, and in return for the services provided, we get a bill. And we really don't have a lot of control over what those bills are. And as we saw last year, that resulted in a fairly large increase to that particular line item, and it was actually the largest driver of our budget last year. And so special ed costs are always going to be a concern. Along those same lines, we also see there is an ever-increasing number of students, and this isn't particular to East Granby, but there's an ever-increasing number of students that choose to attend the various magnet schools. And so we don't really have a lot of control over the tuition that the magnet schools charge, nor do we have any control really over any direct control over whether the student chooses to leave or not. I suppose the way we control that is to make our schools the best that they can, and so that they don't want to leave.
Right.
But if people do make the choice to leave, they certainly have that ability. And so that number, again, that number really has seen a steady increase as we have as the years have gone by.
Right, right. Now it's interesting that those two areas in particular are areas that are influenced by legislation.
Yes.
Right? So a lot of the requirements for how districts, not just East Granby, for how school districts address the needs of students who have disabilities are pretty well defined, and the process for determining whether the student is eligible and the process for ensuring that the student gets the services and the kind of tuition that they need and the placements that are appropriate are very highly legislated, if you will.
Right.
And we, as you said before, do not always have a lot of control over how those needs are met. We certainly don't have any control over the costs that are associated with any of the services or the placements outside of our district. And so, as actually Mrs. Gogel shared in an earlier segment of your schools, one placement of a child who has significant complications can be over $100,000.
Oh,
and
certainly.
We have to educate every child who's in our community. So we don't have an option there either.
Right.
And we
you don't
have
have
to
the option
meet
of who moves
with
into
the
your
students.
district. Yeah.
Right. We don't have that option to control who comes. And none of us know when we have children what needs those or special needs those children are going to have.
That's
so, this is just a fact of life, if you will, that we have to educate all of our learners. And we also know as educators that not every child learns in the same way. Not every child has the same, capacity to learn, and so we therefore have to be somewhat individualized when we look at our population of students with special needs. The magnet schools, they are increasing in number.
They are. I think there are 2 or 3 more that are coming online this year.
Yes, they are. And, it behooves every district to really make sure that the programs that they're offering are programs that will meet the needs of students, programs that are viable, programs that provide learners with opportunities to engage in authentic learning experiences and give them the skills that they're going to need for the 21st century environment or world, global society that they're going to have to function in. So it really behooves every district to do that. And as a small district like East Granby, we have to be meticulous, if you will, about how we use our resources, about best practices, and how we implement best practices in our district to make sure that we get the results that we're looking for. Not too long ago, East Granby was highlighted as the #1 school district in the state, giving the best bang for your buck as far as the investment in education and the growth in that community, and the return in terms of student achievement and what the public schools have to offer. And I think, that is something that perhaps has mixed blessings because we really don't have a lot of resources in comparison to some other school districts, but we certainly make excellent use of what we have, and we do have a very committed and dedicated staff that makes that happen.
I agree with all that, and I think you're right in saying that given the small size of our district, I mean, we have to make every dollar count. Every individual who works here has to be utilized to the maximum, the maximum ability that we have to use them. There can't be any wasted slots with personnel, and there can't be any wasted dollars. And I think that we do a really great job. I know that we, in addition to getting the most bang for your buck, we've won several other awards. The district has won several other awards, thanks to the people who are working here in district, and so we should be really proud of that.
Right. I think as a small district, we've also taken the time to look at what do we have as educational assets. And how can we make those assets truly work for our students, meaning that our students leave our district with significant credentials and experiences, learning experiences that can give them a competitive edge and give them an advantage when they are either applying for work or applying to a college or for some sort of post-high school productive experience. And so our new fifth-year Associates in Science degree program is, I think, an incredible example of how schools, in the absence of superfluous resources, are able to partner with institutions of higher education, in our case as Nanta Community College, and also partner with our local community, in our case our East Granby manufacturers, and pool our thoughts or resources around what we can do with our assets to really make it benefit our students. I think, for a student to go through 4 years of high school following a particular program and doing one more year at a community college and ending up with an associate's degree that probably costs them a few $100s is phenomenal.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of how we do leverage our resources and use them, leverage them very effectively, and it's, clearly something that not everyone else is doing. I think people are catching on. You're starting to see other people trying to copy our program, but I think we were definitely the first in the state to do it, and getting due recognition for that.
Right, and I know the other community colleges are starting a program using our model, and I think that's really a unique thing. But we are small. We don't have a lot of resources, but in these days, small is not good enough. We have to be small and extraordinary. Correct. So what it really means for us is that we have to continue this process of looking at our resources that we have, making the best use of our resources, and putting in place programs that will keep our resident students here in our own public schools, making sure that the programs that we engage them in truly are meaningful, and that when they leave here, they will feel like, I was highly educated. Right,
and that's the number one way that we're going to keep students from wanting to go to those magnet schools, is to provide, kind of creative programming, thinking outside of the box, such as the fifth year, the Asnuntuck fifth year program. Those are the kinds of things that are going to keep the students here and from attending magnet schools.
All right. So we have a few more minutes. I just want to try to pull back a little bit and talk a little bit more about our budget. Our educational program is funded by federal dollars in terms of federal grants that support our special education program, and in the past have, through the Race to the Top or the ARA monies, have funded some other programs for us. We also get funding from the state in terms of the education cost-sharing dollars that come directly to the town. That goes into the town's budget. Then the town gives us a portion of that towards education. And also we have some local grants that we have been awarded and have been using very effectively to support our program. We also participate in the Choice program out of Hartford. So we engage students from Hartford in our education program. We have approximately 55 students, and we're able to spread those students out throughout the school from, in our case, kindergarten through grade 12.
That's right.
which puts, one or two students in each classroom, not overwhelming any particular classroom.
Right.
And Hartford and the state does send us some dollars for tuition.
That's correct.
For each of those students, as well as an after-school social supports, academic and social supports grant.
Mm-hmm.
And the unique thing, the wonderful thing about having those funds is that we're able to use those funds to support programs in our district for all kids.
That's right.
And a lot of what we're able to offer, both during the day and after school, those elements are funded through those tuition dollars. So, that is another way that we have garnered some resources to provide education to a variety of students in our community.
Right, and it's another way I think of just thinking outside the box in terms of trying to find funding solutions. I mean, we do try to, we do have about 55 students, as you mentioned, and we do try to place them in classes where there is the ability to place them. We don't want to try to overburden to the extent we can any one particular grade. Mm-hmm. And I know that we get the money that we get from Hartford. I mean, we get $6,500 for one through 12.
8,000.
Oh, 8,000. I'm sorry.
Because we're at the 6% mark.
That's right. And then we get an additional $4,000 on top of
for
that for kindergartners. So we're getting between $8,000 to $12,000 per student, and hopefully not increasing our costs other than providing an extra textbook or something like that for the student in the class. We're not going out and hiring additional teachers to do that. So that really is a great supplement to the education budget that we have.
Right. And those funds, as you said, have enabled us to do a number of things. So
Mm-hmm.
we have about 1 minute left,
Sure.
if you can believe that. And of course, this discussion about our budget and how we support our schools could go on for a very long period of time.
It could.
And so
It often does.
we will have additional segments where we talk more specifically about special portions of our budget. But I want to thank you very much for being a part of your schools today.
Well, great. Thank you for asking me.
I've enjoyed working with you. Mr. Sanford is going to be leaving the board shortly, sadly. But we've enjoyed your leadership, and we thank you for doing that and for serving the community.
Well, thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.
That is it for this edition of Your Schools.